Mel Gibson on his horse riding up and down the lines going.
Freedom! When you were working on Bourne, what was Matt like working with?
I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I'm getting old and it doesn't matter too much anymore.
Is Russell a pretty good athlete naturally? Did he have boxing experience?
And he'd already dislocated his shoulders. Russell has.
Let me ask you this, man. I noticed you got a pretty broad background, you know?
Yeah.
And it looks like you started in stunts in TV. Was it where you first started?
Well, actually, I mean, historically, my background is I left school at 16, trained as an engineer for a few years. And I was going to university to study engineering. And I'd always wanted to act. I'd never had the opportunity. I mean, I'm from a sort of a hard knocks sort of northern town in England. And it was one of those things, you know, you're an actor. That's only strange people do acting stuff. It's, you know, you're. And so I decided I wanted to act, and I went to drama school instead of going to university for engineering. So literally, I trained as an actor for a few years, graduated, and then started basically doing some theater and some small TV roles as an actor. And that I met a guy who was training to be a stuntman, was in one of the theater shows I was doing. And in England at the time, you needed to get a minimum of 6 qualifications in various sports: scuba diving, rescue diver, gymnastics to a high level, martial arts to a black belt. You needed to have 6 different qualifications in order to qualify as a probationary stuntman.
Oh, gotcha.
And I'd done a lot of martial arts. I was doing some fencing and things at the time. So I thought that would be fun. Basically an extra string to the bow. I was never intending to really become a stuntman at that point. I mean, I was 21, I guess. And I thought, well, you know what? I mean, it'll keep me fit. And if nothing else, it'll allow me, you know, the ability to sort of potentially do my own action as an actor. So that's how I sort of started into it. I trained for a few years, you know, did a lot of martial arts, got into the British team, became London fencing champion.
What kind of martial arts did you do?
Well, I did Taekwondo for about 4 or 5 years. And then I went into Wushu after that because I thought it was more suitable for the film industry, the way things were going. And so I got into the Wushu, the British team in the Wushu. I came second in the European Championships a long time ago. But, you know, it was Wushu, Taekwondo. I mean, I did Hapkido, Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Taekwondo, 2 styles of karate, Thai boxing, a little boxing. So I mixed and matched everything.
So you were like doing MMA before it was like MMA.
Yeah, I mean, not obviously just from my point of view, what I wanted to do was to be able to go into a movie. And if they said, oh, we liked something from that Korean movie, can you do a Korean style? Yes, I can do that. Oh, we like something Japanese style. Can you do a karate? Yes, I can do that. So I wanted to have that background where I could mix and match anything, which turned out to be very, very helpful when I did Bourne, the first Bourne.
Nick Powell's really good at that. He did Braveheart and Gladiator and these movies that had really compelling battle sequences and fight sequences. Me and Nick probably worked with about 7 stunt guys for a month on one fight in particular.
Work yourself up for that? Yeah. So I wanted to have that background where I could mix and match anything, which turned out to be very, very helpful when I did Bourne, the first Bourne.
Yeah.
Because, you know, obviously I used a lot of different styles in Bourne to try to sort of to change things up for Matt Damon.
Let me ask you this. So when you were working on Bourne, how closely did you work with Matt Damon? And did you do like pre-work with him, or how did that work?
No, what happened was the director and Matt had decided that they wanted to do a Filipino martial art. They wanted to do a Cali Eskrima style fight because at that point, no one had ever done it on screen properly.
Yeah.
You know, outside of a straight martial arts movie or something.
I love the Bournes, by the way, man. I really do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it was basically, I went in 6 weeks or so before we start shooting, and Matt had already done 3 months of Cali Eskrima, and he'd basically done the Filipino style, a lot of training. And when I met the director, he says, I want to do the Filipino style. And I said, yeah, but it's going to look too repetitive, too similar. I mean, if you have, there's only so many times you want to do the same moves over and over again before it looks like it looks like. And my description to him was, and I shouldn't say, I won't say it because it's politically incorrect now, but exactly. But basically, I said, I think it'll look boring, and so I said, let me have a play with it, and I will come up with a style, mixing and matching, and sort of have that Eskrima feeling, and give you that kind of a feeling, but something that hasn't been. So I mixed some Krav Maga, some Thai style, some basic kick, and the style that Matt had been spent 3 months training for. And so I kind of came up with this version. Basically, I choreographed the fight, and trained Matt, directed the fight, edited the fight. The whole sort of thing there. So
you were in the editing room as well for Bourne, like putting the fights together.
Well, what happened was, and again, it's another. I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I'm getting old, and it doesn't matter too much anymore. So I got a phone call a few months after. I'd literally choreographed the fight, trained Matt, directed the fight, shot the fight, like from start to finish. Doug Lyman, the director, was sort of in another room, and he watched a few playbacks and stuff, but basically said, Nick, get on with it. So I did the whole thing. They edited the fight, and then I got a phone call from a producer on the movie basically saying, Nick, what did you do? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, everything's so tight. I said, no, I got all the shots that I needed. He said, well, I've seen an edit, and the editor's saying there's no other footage. Get on a plane. So I was in Vancouver at the time. I flew down. I think we were editing at Sony. I flew down, went into the edit suite, saw the fight, and I went, this is not the fight I shot. I mean, yes, it is shots that I shot, but it's not the way I envisaged the fight to be done. So, with the editor, he says there's no other footage. So the producer at the time, Frank Marshall, basically got me another editor and said, go into another edit suite over there and have a look at everything. Have a look at all your footage. So we went into another room, and all the shots that I wanted to use, well, not all, but I mean, 50-60% of the shots were there, but a number of shots were actually in the garbage, in the trash can, in the edit.
Oh, wow.
And so we exed the fight, and that was pretty much the fight that you see in the movie.
So when you first seen the footage that they used, was it just that they used everything like super close up, like the super close up stuff, and you couldn't see anything, or what was the reasoning for?
Yeah, I mean, it was so tight, and it was so sort of impressionistic, which is they kind of went a little bit more that way after the first one.
Okay.
But in the first one that I did, the lights have come back on.
So we got power, we got light.
Exactly. So in the first movie, I kind of, everything was shot. I know it seems weird, but everything was actually shot on a Steadicam or a sort of a hand. There were some wides that I just with a little movement on a steady bag on the ground and things for different angles. And everybody thinks it was handheld because the Steadicam operator at the time, there was a French guy, Valentin, and he's the best Steadicam operator I've ever seen. And literally, he was throwing the camera from one hand to the next, and just I'd say start here. By the time he's throwing the second punch, I'd like it to be on his other shoulder. And he was throwing that camera around like I've never seen anyone do that with a Steadicam. And so the whole fight in the apartment was shot on Steadicam. Which looks like it's handheld, but he was so fast that he could do it, use a Steadicam like handheld, and did an amazing job. And when I saw
when they're in the bathroom and all that stuff, when they're beating each other up real bad, and then they end up in the bathroom. Okay, gotcha.
In the apartment, he swung in through the window, smashed through the window. They went down the apartment, shot up the roof, and they had a fight on the apartment glass down the corridor, and then the pen in the hand, everything.
Yeah.
So that fight, as I said, we shot it over 3.5 days. The whole fight was a 3.5 day shoot, which I did the whole shoot. And basically, again, when I saw the first edit, the producers were sort of, it's too crazy. It's too tight, everything. So I went and recut it. But basically, the fight that you see, I was trying to make it feel frenetic without it sort of being crazy and sort of, so close that, which it kind of, I mean, I'm going back to, I think, number 2 or 3, where they started to get really into that sort of crazy handheld thing, which Taken sort of copied. And then I never understood it, because if you switch off the sound on sort of Taken 2 or 3 or whatever it was, you can't see, there's like 50 cuts in 2 seconds, and you can't tell what's going on. And the sound is kind of what makes the fight. Which I never really liked. And then when you see John Wick, they kind of really let it breathe. So I was kind of trying for something which the John Wick to me can sometimes be a little slow in terms of, it feels like it's breathing a little. If you switch off the sound on a John Wick fight and you watch it, it can feel a little bit slow. It's really well done. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think they've done some amazing work. And then if you watch the Taken, you end up with something that's so frenetic. You could have just thrown 3 or 4 punches and put cameras in different places, and you sort of use the sound to make it feel exciting. And I was trying to get something in between those two, which obviously at that time John Wick hadn't been done, and neither had Taken. We were sort of trying to, as I was told at the beginning, to try to reinvent the genre a little bit.
So let me ask you, what movies did you grow up on then? Because if you were trying to shoot that style, because I know me personally, like I was a big fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yep.
I like the big wide, because I think there's variations of it. Like you can do the wide and then you cut in for the closest to really get that when you're doing some punches and things like that. Was that something you were trying to do, like add a little bit of the old school with new school, or what?
I was trying to make it feel kinetic. I mean, that it was there was movement in every shot. So I wasn't really, at that point, I was trying to keep everything moving. So while the punches were happening, the camera was constantly moving the whole time.
So you almost did a pre-dance with
it. Breathe a little bit, and you could sort of pull back and wait for it. But it was, I grew up, I mean, I was a big fan of the Jackie Chan stuff and the Chinese movies at the time, obviously some Japanese stuff. And from the fight point of view, I think the Asians had it sort of over us in so many ways. At the same time, it kind of felt very repetitive. I mean, I loved wushu and everything else. And, but once you've seen a guy fighting wushu against a guy fighting wushu, it's the same thing. And so the idea that Doug Liman had, and I'm guessing Matt at the same time, to use a sort of Filipino martial art was really interesting to me. It was that they wanted to do something that hadn't been seen. It was just, again, if you do that kind of a style and it stays in that style for the whole fight, which it wasn't a massive fight. I think it was about 120 moves if you look at it from beginning to end. But if you stay in that style the whole time, it kind of feels a little bit, repetitive in terms of, so how do I make that style, which Matt's been spending time learning, feel fresh, new, utilize it so it looks cool in the movie, but at the same time have a realistic feel to it, because you can't do that when somebody's kicking you, and I don't want to use the same style all the way through. So let's use some Krav Maga, let's use some Thai boxing, let's use some whatever felt right. And again, I made that assumption that this guy was someone who'd been trained in all different things. Whatever situation you find yourself in, you can adapt to that situation because of all the training you've had, which is again an MMA sort of trait. We didn't use any jiu-jitsu in the fight. That's really the only thing from a sort of an MMA point of view that I would have now used a little bit more of at that stage, which we didn't do. But again, with everything in Bourne, like the climb down the outside of the building at the embassy, when he climbed down, I wanted it to feel real, not too exaggerated. So I basically got one of the best climbers in the world to come along, put a safety line on him, and I said, find a route down the outside of the building. Whatever route you find, we'll take, so that we know it actually can be achieved by one of the best guys. my brief and discussion with the director and producers was, this guy is, imagine he's the best fighter in the world. Imagine he's the best climber in the world. Imagine he's the best driver in the world. It's not that he's a superhero, but he's as good as the best human could possibly be at this stage. And obviously there's a little bit of leeway, dramatic, interpretation of what that is. But we weren't trying to make him something more than a real person could be. He can't leap 30 feet without breaking his legs. I mean, whatever he did could really be achieved. Yes, you might, break a leg, you might sprain something, you might do something, but it was always something that could really be achieved by a real person.
I like that, the realism. What was Matt like working with? Was he able to pick up on stuff pretty quick, or did it take him a little time? Yeah.
No, Matt was great. I mean, I've been really lucky. I mean, I'll finish off with Matt first, but I mean, Matt did every move in that fight. I used a double for one kick, and literally Matt at the time hadn't done much kicking, and I wanted one kick to look pretty nice, where he knocks Nicky, the hitman that had come in to kill him, over the desk. And Matt's leg wasn't quite in the right position that I wanted it to be, to make it look like he was an expert with that kick. So I literally used one double for a leg kick. That was it. And everything else in the fight sequences, Matt did everything himself. 99.9% was Matt Damon for every fight.
That's pretty gangster. He must have been, yeah. That's a lot of work, man. And did he have any prior experience that you know of in martial arts?
No, nothing at all. I mean, he'd literally, as I said, he trained for 3 months in martial arts and with weapons, so that he was really familiar when he turned up on set. And at the end, when we came up with the idea of him firing the gun upside down, while he had the one in the right position and one upside down, and he was shooting with 2 guns, and one was normal, one was reversed. I mean, he adapted so quickly to that. He's like, oh yeah, I can do it. And let me just wreck it. And he was like just spot on. He put so much time in. I mean, this was a big movie for Matt. He'd just done a couple of movies that hadn't been quite as successful as he'd hoped. And I mean, as he said to me at the time, this is a really big one for me. This has got to be, it's got to really work for me. So he put so much time and effort in.
He knew he had to kind of like give it everything he had, basically, is what you're saying on this aspect, especially with the stunts and the acting and the character and development and all that. Yeah, it makes sense. So, man, I mean, you got so many credit. I was looking through your stuff, like Batman, things like that, Gladiator, and I'm a big fan. I get the poster actually back there, Braveheart.
It was the epic films that really inspired me to do Braveheart.
This is a little piece of cinema history. Rarely do you see this many people in the shot.
The script was given to me on an acting basis, of course, but I felt like I had to tell the story all of a sudden, because I kept reworking scenes in my head,
If we join, we can win. If we win, well, then we'll have what none of us have ever had before. A country of our own.
You seem like I know you said you studied a lot of different martial arts, but I noticed the 2 movies, well, I shouldn't say, I think it's Outcast that you directed, has a lot of swords. So did you develop the sword? Were you more natural as a sword master, or what got you into the swords?
Well, when I was at drama school, in England, you do a lot of sword work, sword and shield, rapier and dagger, everything else, because you do a lot of theater. So I did that, and I really enjoyed it. And when I graduated, I started to do some theater fight directing courses to get better at it. And then when I got into martial arts, I studied kendo, so I had the Japanese style. And then when I got into wushu, I studied straight sword and broadsword, and my speciality, one of the demos I was doing for the British team, was double swords, double broadsword.
Okay, yeah, I noticed that.
I had a lot of that sort of double broadsword style, and also I was competing as a fencer. I became London fencing champion as well with foil. So I was trying to get a lot of experience in different sword styles, so that when I started on Braveheart, I choreographed every fight on Braveheart, taught Mel, did everything on that side of things. And again, I utilized a lot of martial arts and then changed it so that they didn't look like they were doing the martial arts. So you'll see a lot of blows where they're protecting and swinging it around, which is a Chinese style. And then there'll be a little bit of a Japanese in the middle. and I'll
Okay.
combine them and make it. And I'll say, no, if you put your hand like that, all of a sudden it's Chinese. If you put your hand like this, it's okay. It takes away that sort of Asian feel. So I would kind of, with Mel's movements, to try to make him really fluid, I used a lot of the wushu style, but the sword was so, I mean, it was a 4-foot something sword.
Okay.
So literally, yeah, it was such a large sword, and he had to do a lot of things with it where he's wielding it. And it was very difficult to do. So I had to make it really fluid because it was difficult to stop the sword in one way. So the martial arts helped a lot. And I could, because Mel was so busy, Mel Gibson,
Yeah,
he was directing, producing, starring.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time I'd choreograph his fights. I only trained him for a few weeks before we started shooting.
Damn.
And then he got into it really heavy as a director. So he'd come up, he'd go, Nick, what's the next fight? Okay, fight 1, part 3, Mel Gibson. And so 4 guys would run over. Everybody knew. So I would just go, part 6, fight 4, section 2. And then 3 more guys would come over, and I'd show Mel the fight. Literally, he's coming from here. He would do this. And then this guy's coming from here. So you've blocked him. You're cutting him while he's about to strike. You've got to come back because his second move's coming. And then this third guy's coming from here. So I teach him the fight literally as we were getting ready to shoot. And I'd be putting the cameras ready to shoot. He would learn the fight 5 minutes before we shot it. All the guys around him knew everything. So he had so much on his mind. He would learn that fight within 5 minutes of it, because I kept every fight to about 4 or 5 moves, and then I would do the next section. So I would show him the first 4 moves and all the guys knew it perfectly because I'd basically been doing the fight for Mel in all the rehearsals, so that everybody knew exactly where to be. So when I said fight 4, section 2, they would run over. I'd show the moves. Everybody's good, and then Mel would just learn it and go through it. And
so you would shoot it in sections, basically. So you would break it up into like, all right, 5 moves, shoot it. 5 moves, shoot it.
Yeah, pretty much on that in that movie. But the thing was that I knew that it was going to be so quickly cut. They were never going to hold the shot more than about 3 or 4 moves. So it was literally, this is now they're cutting out of it to go to another character. Then they'll come back to Mel and he's on his second section. Then they'll come to another character. And then they'll come back to Mel. So there was one fight that we did, which was a long fight, never ended up in the movie. We did all the rehearsals, everything else. And that was a 70 or 80 move sword fight. Never ended up in the movie, but everything else was literally 4 or 5 moves, but you're in the middle of a battle. So you're on Mel, boom, 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 cut to someone else, boom, boom. And so you didn't have to sort of keep that continuity going all the way through because you knew there would be a cut there, a cut there. So we were basically, okay, Mel hasn't had time to learn this. We'll shoot those 4 moves, and then we know we can put a cut in to go somewhere else. Learn the next.
Did he shoot the dialogue like first and then do all the battles? Was that broken up like into separate, like towards the first part of the movie we're going to shoot all the dialogue, and then like towards the end of the movie we're going to shoot all the fights?
Not necessarily. We did. I mean, because we were in Scotland and then Ireland, so we went to Scotland for I think 6 weeks or so. We had to shoot the attack on the village. We had to shoot some pieces there. Then we went to Ireland, and he would shoot some pieces, but once the battle started, because on some days we had 1,500 extras for the only a few days where we had that many where they all had to be fighting in a big melee. And I had 1 week to teach 1,500 people how to use a sword, basically. And then, we kept 500 of those guys back for the main sort of crowd sequences. And then once we started the battle stuff, we went through the battles nonstop because obviously it's a massive budgetary consideration to have that many people. And, you can't bring them in, send them back, bring them in, send them back. So once we started, it was basically 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it was. I can't remember how many weeks, 10 weeks of battles nonstop throughout. Of course, in shooting that, there was always going to be, Mel on his horse riding up and down the lines going, they can take they can't take our
freedom.
Exactly. So we were shooting all that stuff at the same time as the battles because we still needed masses of extras for those things as well.
Gotcha. So you would keep like a core group that were in the front main battles, the main actors, the main stunt guys that were doing the main battles, and then towards the back of the line would be the guys that were maybe extra. What would that be called? Like extra stunt guys?
Well, we had, you've got your lead characters, your stunt guys. Then I had the A-team, background A-team, where we're basically out of the 500 or so that I actually spent some real time with. I chose about 120 out of those guys where I went, that guy's better than most of these guys. That guy, and then they would learn a separate fight. Gotcha. And then the next 375 or so, they would only learn 1 or 2 small fights where they would always work together. Because after that, you've got your first 30, 40 stunt guys, your 100 guys around them, which had all learned sort of were better movers. And then after that, you had the secondary background guys. And then after that, you had guys who literally came in for 2 hours. And I just told them to, do this, and do this in the background, 3 moves, and push them right the way in the background. So we didn't, we didn't ever really see what they were doing. You just saw some movement way back there.
They get their stunt credit. Boom.
Well, no, they would literally, I don't think they even got a background credit.
Let me touch on this. So I was looking through. I seen you worked on War.
All that happened on that movie, I was in Vancouver. At the time, my literary agent, I was starting to direct stuff, and my literary agent was working on the movie. And he said, pop along tonight. I just want to have a chat with you about another project. I literally went on set because they were shooting in Vancouver. So I drove on set, and I saw a couple of the stunt guys who were doing the work. And I just said, hey, how you doing? And because I'd known them from other stuff. And I was talking to my literary manager at the time, and the stunt coordinator came up and said, Nick, can you drive right now? I said, yeah, just jump in that car. Just do a driving for. He said, you're going to just drive the car. It's going to hit the motorcycle. Is going to hit. All I need you to do is drive from A to B, hit that spot exactly the same time the bike's coming in. He's going to fly over the windscreen. You're going to be. I said, yeah, okay. Let me just jump in the car a second. Let me just find the mark. Right. Okay, ready. Roll cameras. I literally drove the car up to a point so that the bike would hit me, fly over the car, and that was all I ever did on War. So it's like I got a stunt credit literally for going in to talk to my agent at the time.
That's funny because you're basically getting paid for road rage.
Exactly. Oh, I mean, it was actually fun. It was great because I was literally sitting there chatting away. Hey, Nick, can you jump in a car quick? What? Do a stunt now? And it was, yeah, quick. So okay, what the hell? How much am I getting? Yeah, okay, I'll do it.
So you didn't get to like work with Jet Li or Statham or anybody like that?
No. It was funny because I met Jason in China at the Shanghai Film Festival. I was going there with Nick Cage to sort of promote something. And basically I met Jason, and I reminded him, we'd actually trained together when he was a diver, high diver. And I used to go to Crystal Palace, which was where the British high diving teams, the springboard diving, high diving team would train, because he was a really high class diver at the time when he was a youngster. And I remember training with him a couple of times, so I kind of met him there. And we used to train together. Oh yeah, and that's the only time I've ever met him after the initial training. So it was interesting.
Gotcha. So to touch on Nick Cage a little bit.
Nick is great. Nick was an enormous relief for me because when you start a movie, you don't know what you're getting into. It's not like other occupations where you've worked with your boss for 10 years and you know exactly what they're like.
Because I was looking through and I watched your movies that you did, and I thought Outcast was really good. I love the fight scenes in it. Was that prior? That must have been, so you must have knew Nick Cage prior before you started.
I didn't. Actually, what happened was Outcast was originally written for one character to sort of leave the war, the Crusades, and basically make his way through China. And then when the sales agents were putting everything together, we already had Hayden Christensen locked. And it was basically going to be a Hayden Christensen movie. And then they decided just before we started, we wanted to add another character and bring someone like Nick in. So literally, we were trying to rewrite scripts and everything before. At that point, to be honest with you, the script had kind of got out of control anyway. We had a Chinese producer who wanted it to be a Chinese movie. We had Western producers who were trying to make it a Western movie with a Chinese flavor. And the script kind of got completely lost somewhere in the mix, and then trying to add another character that wasn't even in the script. And in the end, it was I wasn't very happy with the way things happened. I mean, I tried as hard as I could to make it into a decent movie, but really, we were lost a little bit from the script at the beginning. I think everybody did a good job with what we had, but wasn't the nicest experience that I'd ever had. That was for sure.
Let's touch on Outcast a little bit, because I'm a producer as well, actor. I love martial arts. I've trained martial arts my whole life. I can do kicks and all that stuff and fun stuff. I actually did a training session with swords recently.
All right.
Which was really cool. I have never done any stage stuff, and we had one of those big German long swords is what we were using.
Oh yeah.
And I got to train and put the gear on, and I was like, I got some footage of it. I'm gonna drop that video coming up. But so with the Outcast situation, and you were working with sales agents. So what tends to happen is when they pre-financed the movie, because you had Hayden Christensen on board.
We had Hayden, and then they needed another character to get some extra budget in. So we approached Nick, and Nick basically came on board, and we went from there. But as I said, we were still rewriting script and changing things the days, once we started shooting, we were still trying to get things together.
That though, were they sometimes, I know when the financiers come into the play, they're like, oh, can we make it more for our market? Because if they're pre-financing it, are they going to say, hey, can we have these elements within the film to sell to our audience? Did you have
actually
that thing?
The sales agents were fine with that stuff. It was actually, we had a Chinese producer who he was a little crazy. And because basically he had some crazy ideas that no one else was on board with, but because he was essentially financing the movie, it's either you do this or you leave. And I was ready to leave, but then they didn't want me to leave otherwise, because we were already prepping. And to be honest with you, as I said, I was at that point before we started where I didn't really want to do the movie because it was changing so rapidly. And so much, in a way, we had a much better script at the beginning than the one we shot with. I mean, from my point of view, the Western sales agents weren't too much. They weren't influencing things too much. So it was that. I'll give you one example. We'd been doing the publicity for the movie 5 days before it opened. So it was opening on Friday in China in 5,000 screens.
Wow.
So it was opening he'd done a really cheap 3D conversion because he wanted to make more money with this, and it made the movie so dark you couldn't see what was going on. And then he wanted to recut it after we'd already cut it, and the Western producers had approved it, and then he recut it, Chinese producer. And then he did a 3D conversion that we weren't happy with. And I was literally Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night in different cities in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and doing publicity for the movie. And they were doing pre-screenings. And we would walk into a pre-screening, and every movie theater we went into 3 or 4 movie theaters a day, myself, Hayden, Louis Fay, the lead female. And basically we would go in and say hi to the audience and see how they liked the movie, give a couple of words and everything, normal publicity rounds. And everybody was very happy with it. Mm-hmm. And he'd already, as far as I was aware, the information I was given by the Chinese sales team was the opening day had sold out. But the producer wanted to have more screens because we weren't the biggest opening that weekend. There was another movie opening, which was a sequel to something that was very successful. So they had more screens than us. So he basically threatened to pull the movie off the screens prior to the opening, after we'd done the publicity. So on Thursday night at 11 o'clock, I was in an elevator with Louis Fay, and she just got a text message in Mandarin. So she said, look at this, and obviously I couldn't read it, so she read it to me that basically we're pulling the movie off the screens tomorrow. They've already pre-sold their first day's tickets, and the producer pulled it off the screens the night before it opens in 5,000. So now you've got 5,000 theater owners going, what are we putting on now? Nobody had any idea that he was going to do that right up to the sort of 11 o'clock on Thursday night. So I'm calling up the Western producers going, hey, what's going on? Why is it coming off the screen? No, it is on the screens. No, it's not. I've just seen a message. Nobody knew. He literally took it into his own hands to pull it off 5,000 screens the day before it opened.
That's crazy, man. Wow. So I could see that could really kind of, and was that your first directorial debut, or did you do stuff prior?
No, that was, I directed bits of television and little things here and there, but that was my feature debut. Yeah. So
it was big thing.
Yeah.
Man, I did see homage though. It looked like you paid homage to, and I don't know if this was intentional, Braveheart shot. There was a shot of the sword stuck in the ground. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The sword stuck in the ground, and there was like to the right of the frame. I was like, oh, that's kind of Braveheart right there.
There were a few homage shots in there. It was stuff that I'd done in previous movies and things. Of course, it was, I only had 50 or 55 days to shoot the whole movie, and I was directing main unit and second unit. So, that battle stuff. I was choreographing fights while I was directing, and then I'd get my assistant, my stunt coordinator at the time, who had been with me on a few movies, to go and keep rehearsing it while I started to shoot other stuff over here. Then I'd go and shoot that while I was kind of going through the whole thing. It was a bit of a mishmash, sort of mix and match kind of thing.
Yeah, you definitely had. I like the double swords when he pulled out the double swords. That was dope. I really like that. And then there was a shot at the beginning too. It was really cool when he grabbed the spear and he just chucked it at the guy. Yeah. Right when him and Nick Cage were down there talking. That was really cool. So I don't know. I enjoyed the movie, man. To be honest with you,
I'm glad you did. It was. I was disappointed, but as I said, everybody tried their best given the circumstances that we were in, and hey, you just do the best you can do.
Yeah, the fights were definitely. You can tell the fights were put together very well, well, let me ask you this then, like, what's your passion then? Because it seems like you went from the acting, the stunts, because you wanted to be an actor originally.
Yep.
Did you continue that, or did you realize, hey, maybe I don't like the acting thing, but I really love the stunts, or I really love the directing? Because you've done second unit, you've done first AD work as well, I want to say.
Well, not officially a first AD. A lot of the time, when you're up against things and you've got a lot more experience than some of the people you might be working with, you kind of run the floor a little bit more than you should, than you might want to. When you've got good first ADs, they run everything so well for you that it's great, because as a director, really, you shouldn't be thinking about any of that stuff. As I said, I started out as an actor, and then when I qualified and as a stunt person, it was really only intending to be a backup to, sort of, so I can go and, okay, I get a couple of days stunt work, then I go back to acting. You're an action guy, you don't understand drama. This guy, he's just come out of drama, he's just come out of film school, he's made a short movie, 5-10 minutes, and it was really well received at some obscure festival, so we're going to give him the job of directing, TV series or whatever it is. So it's kind of a tricky. It's having done so much action, it can be limiting in terms of getting other stuff, because I still consider myself like a drama guy first. Even when I'm doing action, I'm looking at it going, well, why is the character doing this? I'm not just, let's create a cool fight. Anyone can create a cool fight. It's a pop video, but you're trying to tell the audience more about the characters and the story, or you should be with the action. The action should be like physical dialogue to me. So
that's true, man. Yeah. Being able to tell the story or their character through action that makes so much sense, man.
I think it was the first time on Bourne. I remember sitting there with the producers and the director, and everybody was thinking, how can we make this sequence in the embassy better? And I came up with the idea as Matt's walking down the corridor, he's so attuned to his circumstances and his location that he just literally looks, and there's a fire exit map on the wall, and he grabs the exit and he starts looking at the map while he's walking to figure out how he's getting out of the building. And it was like, wow, and it's little things like that that tell the audience so much about a character that if you can put those moments in, it's like you just saved a page of exposition that you didn't really need. Just you've given the audience so much information in such a short and concise manner that you're achieving what a lot of people really want to achieve in that way. I mean, that's what good directing is to me.
Interesting. Yeah, because I remember that part. I actually remember it kind of stands out to me in a way of where I was like, oh, that's smart. Like you kind of wouldn't think of that for him to just grab the thing off there so he knows where he's going. It's like, oh, okay, this stairwell, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's telling a lot through just one movement. Interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's those moments. If you can find those moments, if you can figure out something in the middle of a fight sequence that, yes, you can have bam, 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 and it's a good fight. It's cool. It really looks good. What did it tell the audience? It's just, other than the guy's a cool, he's good at fighting. What did it tell them? Is there something in there that I can give you? Which is why movies like Cinderella Man. What did it tell them? Is there something in there that I can give you? Which is why movies like Cinderella Man.
Love that movie.
I mean, you sit there with Ron Howard, who's, one of the nicest directors I've ever worked with, and sort of chatting about how to make it. And I mean, so comfortable in his own skin. Nick, what's next? What are we doing? Where should we put the camera? It's just so comfortable. And then again, with someone like Ron going, Nick, pop up to the edit suite, have a look, go and see if you can find any better shots than the ones the editors are using. And he's just so confident in his team, and the editors are so confident of, it's just it's a family situation with someone like Ron, where anyone that can help him make it better, he's all for it. It's not a big ego thing.
So you did all the boxing fights?
Yeah.
You all those? Wow. Okay. What was that like? That experience?
It was Russell. Well, initially I only went in, they already had a stunt coordinator on the movie, and it wasn't really working. And so Russell has asked me to do a number of movies with him since I did Gladiator. He asked me for Master and Commander. He asked me for 3:10 to Yuma. He asked me and I couldn't actually do those movies. I think Master and Commander I was doing Last Samurai, and 3:10 I was doing something. But this one, they called me up and said, Russell really wants you to come in and take over on the boxing. And so I kind of went in initially, okay, look, I'm just coming in to do the main boxing sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there and started talking to Ron, he said, Nick, you got to take over the whole show. I need you to take over the whole show. So that's what I did in the end. They'd already had someone, but I went in sort of just to do the boxing, and then ended up taking over everything.
How does that work? So when you're choreographing a boxing scene like that, are you writing the like left, like jab, cross, hook, or are you going watching the footage? Because I know there's historical fights. So how did that play into it?
Well, I did. I mean, I said to Ron at the beginning, what story are you, I mean, I know the story you're trying to tell, but what's the story of this fight? How it's the fact that he was losing at a point, and the Max Bear was a bigger, stronger puncher, and it was the heart, and it was. He said, okay, I'm thinking of doing round 1, round 2, round 5. I can't remember which round 7, round 9. So I went and looked at those rounds historically, and I started to look, okay, that's good. We can use that piece. That doesn't quite work, because as you know, if you watch a real boxing match, 2 people are throwing punches at the same time, and neither of them are moving, neither of them are reacting, and it doesn't necessarily look cinematic. So I've had a lot of trouble in the past with real boxers or real fencers trying to learn choreography, because they're great at fighting. I've had, US champions, etc., come in for auditions, and they can't learn 4 or 5 punches with a reaction. Mm-hmm. Whereas other guys who are not as good as them as a boxer can learn choreography really quick, because we expect, when someone gets hit in the face, we expect their head to move. A lot of boxers don't move. There's a way of moving as a real boxer in a real fight. it's very different to cinematic boxing. So again, I wanted to make the boxing feel very real and not cinematic at the same time to give the audience the cinema feel. And so I studied all the footage, the original footage, and went through and then modified each round to try to pick out the peaks and the valleys that would actually tell the story better. And then I'd choreograph them and then show Ron, and he'd go, "That's great, let's shoot that. That's great, let's shoot that." So again, had a great experience on that movie.
So what does that look like though? So like when you're choreographing, are you just recording the moves that you want to do? Do you write it down? Like how does that work?
No, because I've got a double for Russell and I've got a double for the Max Baer character. And then because the Max Baer character wasn't in the movie as much, Craig. Anyway, Craig he's a theater actor. He does a lot of movies and TV stuff as well. But he had more time where I could literally train him 4 or 5 days a week, whereas Russell was filming 5 days a week, and I could only train him at the weekends. And he'd already dislocated his shoulder, so I had a Saturday for 2 hours and a Sunday. And then I would say, okay, we're doing round one first. We're shooting on Monday, round one. So on Saturday and Sunday, I'd go through round one with Russell, which now Craig already knew. But the double would show Russell the fight. And then basically over the weekend, he'd learn it. And then on Monday and Tuesday, we'd shoot it. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he would do drama so he could rest his shoulder. And then we'd do round two the next weekend, the choreography. So I choreographed the whole fight and basically videotaped it so that the fight is locked, so I could show Ron as to sort of a previs of it. And then once he'd signed off, all I had to do was go through the movement with Russell. And then on the day, we had 6 cameras and 6 camera teams. And Sal, the DOP on that movie, he was doing a lot of the handheld stuff in the ring, and we were getting in there and really making it feel sort of organic and natural. It was a really good experience on Cinderella Man.
Because I'll be honest, I've watched that movie so many times because it has so much heart in it,
Yeah, I think it's very underrated. I think.
Oh yeah, it's one, in my opinion, it's up there with it's like, in my opinion, neck and neck with Rocky. I love Rocky, but I think in some ways it's better than Rocky. So I think it has that balance, and I love the time frame of it. Plus, it's a real story, so you got those elements like, man, it's such a good movie, and it's based off of this real character and this real guy's life.
Yeah, more Raging Bull than Rocky. Yeah.
So like, Raging Bull, I haven't seen that fully through, but I know that's what Robert De Niro, right?
Yeah, no, it's a great movie. Great movie.
I gotta watch it now.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's really good.
Is Russell a pretty good athlete naturally? Did he have boxing experience?
He didn't have boxing experience before the movie started, but he spent a few months training before the movie started. The same as when we did Gladiator, I mean. These things are dangerous, especially because the way I choreographed took a couple of days to choreograph, and then a week or so of rehearsals to bring it up to speed with all the stunt guys. You work it slowly, you build it up very slowly over the first couple of days. You start to put the speed in. Some of the weapons will be rubber if it's particularly near the fingers and things like that, so you use rubber weapons. Most of the time you try to use the metal weapons so it feels more authentic. I've been so lucky. We were talking at the beginning, you said, how was Matt Damon? And I've been so lucky because Russell Crowe, very physical. Tom Cruise, really physical and put so much time in. I spent 7 months with Tom Cruise before we started a day of filming on Last Samurai just to go through everything with him. Matt Damon. So you go through all these, as I said, Tom Cruise, Matt Damon, Russell Crowe. You go through it, and I've just been really lucky to work with these guys that want to put that time in, the effort.
Would you say those guys, like, this is funny that from what I found, those top actors in some ways, they have a very straight, there's a determination there, right? So I feel like it's not that they're natural, but they almost have it almost seems natural ability for them to catch on to like certain sports or like or certain, like whether it's fighting, like you're saying Tom Cruise, you're saying Matt Damon, these guys, would you say there's a natural ability there, or is it a determination with them? What would you say?
I think it's kind of a mix of both. I mean, some of them is, it's that you can't allow yourself to fail sort of attitude, but at the same time, it doesn't matter if you have that determination if you don't have the ability, because the time factor, when you teach someone, you've done martial arts, you teach someone to kick. The first month or two, it starts to look like they're kicking a little bit. The second, the third month, okay, they're starting to feel like they're moving. The fourth, fifth, sixth month, you're starting to sort of go, okay, they're starting to look a little bit like a martial artist now. But you see somebody who's been doing it 7, I can tell literally someone who's a real martial artist walks in and they just move. They just move a little bit with their body, how their head's moving, how their hands are moving, the way their hip moves when they kick. In 5-10 seconds, I can go, that's a martial artist. And to teach someone to look like that in just a few months is really difficult if they don't have some innate ability, some physicality to sort of translate that too. And whether it's, Russell doing his rugby and cricket and everything else when he was a kid and stuff, and then, putting his sort of physicality to it. Tom Cruise just is a good all-round natural athlete. I mean, you look at Tom Cruise and he learned the sword work really quick, but all his fights are there. He's he drives amazingly. He rides motorcycles amazingly. He teaches himself to fly, or at least someone teaches him to fly planes, helicopters. He doesn't, he's just so focused on him being the guy that the sort of everything else is blocked out. It's just, that's what he's got to do. And that's, to me, those are the best actors, whether it's a physical ability or not. I mean, there's great actors out there that don't do a lot of physical sort of, violent work in terms of fights and things like that. But it's still, there's an innate ability to translate whatever it is that's coming in as a character to keep that going. So as an actor, you put yourself into that mindset, and it's now I'm a boxer. For the next 9-10 months, I'm a boxer. I have to think like a boxer. I have to move like a boxer. I have to eat like a boxer. And that's what makes the difference. And people like your Tom Cruises and your Matt Damons and your Russell Crowes and those guys, they do put themselves into that because it's their legacy. In the end, you're going to watch their movie. 30 years down the line. I mean, I still believe that Last Samurai was probably the best action work I've put together.
Did you do all the action choreography for that?
Yeah.
The Last Samurai?
Everything. Every fight, everything, the horses. I wrote the horse sequence, the way that they were getting mowed down by the Gatling guns and everything else. And, brought in a team to train the horses for me. And basically everything in that movie, I was going from main unit to second unit. I was putting the sequence over there together, running over here, doing this, going between units, choreographing every fight, teaching Tom. As I said, I'd asked for 3 months of training for Tom, 3 to 4 months. It was going to be 12 to 16 weeks of prep. And I'm 7 weeks away from shoot. I'd already worked with the director, helping to sort of reimagine some of the sequences when they were still before Tom Cruise even signed on. So I'd already been on the movie for a few months. And then Tom signed on, and we were sort of 7 months away before we were supposed to start shooting. And I got a phone call. I mean, I'd met Tom, just generally met him and had a chat with him because he gets carte blanche on certain areas of the crew that come in. So he had to approve me and everything else. And so I'd met him. I went through the process with him, told him how I was going to do the thing. And he was fully on board. He was, straight away, loved the ideas that I had and everything else. Let's go for it. And I'm thinking, okay, in about 3 months' time, we'll start training. And then I got a phone call. We're 7 months away. Nick, Tom wants to start training. We're 7 months away. Yeah, but he wants to start. He's got this week coming up, and then he's got to do some publicity for Minority Report for a week, and then he'd like you to come back again for 2 weeks. And I thought, wow, 7 months before we start, and he wants to start learning to use a sword and go through footwork and so I fly down and spend 2 hours with him, and then go into the office with the director and go through sequences and do the paperwork and everything else for such a big movie. I mean, we took 550 people from Japan to New Zealand for the battle sequences. So we literally hired a plane. We rented a building and converted it into dormitories and everything else in New Zealand because we were in a small town, and they didn't have the ability to sort of support that many, people coming in. So it was a massive undertaking from our point of view, and it was just amazing that Tom started to put himself into that situation 7 months before we start filming.
So you would say that that's actually probably your favorite movie that you choreographed and worked on and put together?
It's the one I'm most proud of in terms of there were the least amount of compromises.
Gotcha.
I mean, every movie, there's compromises somewhere along the line. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved Cinderella Man. There weren't really any compromises on the boxing and things like that. But the fact is, I was choreographing fights 3 months, 4 months before we start shooting, sending them to Japan, because I'd already been to Japan and auditioned about 700 or 800 people. And I chose the best sword guys and the best stunt guys I could see in Japan, and I picked one guy in Osaka and one guy in Tokyo. You're the guy running the Tokyo training. You're the guy running the Osaka, and I would send them DVDs of the fights I was choreographing in LA. And these guys, they were going twice a week. We were renting a massive hall, and all these guys were coming for free. They weren't getting paid. They would come in to learn the fights. So literally, when the plane landed, I had 550 guys who already knew 7 or 8 fights before we even started training for the movie. I mean, they were training in Japan. They were so dedicated, these guys. It's if you watch things like Gladiator, you can always see, and Braveheart, it happens as well. But if you really, really watch, there's people, and then you'll see 2 people at the back going, and you're kind of going, there's 2 idiots in the. It's okay. Nobody's ever going to know. It's on the screen. There's so much going on. Our eyes on Mel Gibson, or our eyes on, whoever.
Yeah.
And but you can see those. Whereas with Last Samurai, those Japanese guys were so dedicated that they, guys, you cannot stop until we shout cut, even if we're going over your allotted fight. This is the way you're going to link the moves together and then come back. And then if this guy gets down, pull him up off the ground and start again. And they were so dedicated to it that there were the least amount of compromises and the fights that we did where you have Ken Watanabe and Tom Cruise fighting together in the room. And that was so synchronized. And so they trained so hard to get that. So I think if I had to pick one that I was most proud of in terms of this is my work at its peak kind of thing, would be Last Samurai.
I love that movie too. I love the opening. I believe it's the opening where he falls off the horse.
Yeah.
And he envisions him as the white tiger, where he's Tom Cruise is like going bananas trying to fight off like 10 guys.
It looks much better on screen. The thing is, unfortunately, there's slightly more risk inherent with it. Russell is very good. He picks it up very quickly. He's very physical. I went to Australia to start with, spent a couple of weeks with him rehearsing out there. So we were just going through the basic movements out there, getting him used to the sword.
The same as when we did Gladiator, I mean, I went out to Australia to teach him for a month before we moved back to the UK, and then I started to choreograph with him and everything else for another month. So he had a month of basic sword training that I trained him in Australia at his farm, and then a month of training and choreography to sort of go through the fights, and then we would do ongoing choreography as we were shooting the movie. So Russell's a natural athlete. He's a man's man kind of thing. He's one of those guy. I remember we were playing rugby against the Maltese national team, because I used to play rugby a lot when I was a kid, and we were playing Russell desperately. He's a rugby player. He's a big rugby fan. He was so desperate to play in the team. It was the Gladiator team versus the Maltese national team. And half the guys in the Gladiator team had never played rugby. They were just stunt guys who were big guys who were from Eastern Europe. And it wasn't a big thing in Eastern Europe. So only a couple of us really knew the rules. And it was a bit crazy. But Russell was so desperate to play in that game. And the insurance company and the producers wouldn't let him play. He was pissed off. He's definitely a guy who wants to get in there. He's a hands-on guy for sure.
pretty competitive then, you'd
Oh,
say?
very, very.
But they wouldn't let him. So did he do it? So the question is, did he
No,
say
he didn't
fuck
do it.
the
No,
scene
he didn't do
anyways?
it.
No, he didn't do it.
No, he didn't do it.
Too much money, I guess, on the line. He's like, all right, let's wait till after we're done shooting the movie. Then we're going to do the rugby game.
He would have done that if they, I'm sure he would have done that if he could. He's definitely one of those guys. Yeah, I mean, it was when we were doing the horse sequence, and he's got to jump over a chariot in the arena, and again, we had a double to do it. It was all rehearsed, everything else, and he was desperate to get on that horse and do it himself.
With Russell Crowe putting the fight scenes together, because there was a lot of, I mean, there's animals in The Last Samurai, but there seemed like there was more animal with the tigers and the dealing with that. Is that's like an extra added, I guess, complication to the mix? How was that work with?
It is and it's not. I mean, the thing is with Ridley, what he would do was, I mean, Ridley's a great artist, so and he had a really good storyboard guy as well at the time, and so the fight sequence with the tigers, for instance, he would have the main beats. It's like, they start at the beginning, and then he pushes him back towards one tiger. One tiger comes out and swipes, and he just misses his legs. So that's the first beat. So I've got to choreograph all the bits to take us to that beat. And then the next beat in the storyboards is when Russell Crowe's knocked down and the tiger jumps on his, or whatever. I can't remember exactly. It's a long time since I've seen the movie. But I mean, I go out and I go, okay, we've got to start in roughly this position. We've got to get to there. Then from there, we've got to get to here. And these guys have got to let the tiger out. So then you start choreographing the fight. You put it all together. And then you teach the actors. And I mean, I was really lucky. Joaquin Phoenix, Russell Crowe learns really quick. I had 3 weeks. We bought in. Oh, it was Sven. Sven-Ole Thorsen was the guy in the mask. And Sven came in, and he'd not really done much sword work. He was a martial artist. I think he was a karate guy from the Dutch team or something. Or previously he had been. He was a stuntman who was a friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he came in, and I had 3 weeks to teach him, and he was a little stiff. He was not quite as fluent. And Russell learns really quick, and Russell also has sometimes a little short temper, shall we say, in terms of not accepting other people's ability to not be as good as he is sometimes. And so I can teach Russell something in a day, which it might take me 3 days to teach someone else. So I've got to you've got to play the politics of I don't need Russell today for rehearsal. I'll take Sven and I'll go and do this, and then I'll bring Russell in because I know how his temperament is and how it's going to work. And so that fight, you basically choreograph, you work it all out, and then I showed it to Ridley. I just said, "This is the fight," and he looked at it. He went, "Great, let's shoot." There's that much. I mean, there's that much confidence. Once he believes in you, you don't have to worry. It's literally he would just go, "Show me the fight." The one where Russell was chained to Jaimin Hansu as they were chained together, fighting together as a team. I'd gone to Morocco 3 or 4 weeks earlier than everyone else. Oh yeah, Jaimin's great. Yeah. And I put the fight together. Ridley came in with the team. He got off the plane, came straight to the location. He went, "Okay, show me the fight." "Okay, guys, let's do it. Ready and action," from beginning to end. Everything was choreographed like a theatrical thing so that he could shoot any direction he wanted. And he'd never used that. He'd never had that before. He was so used to shooting lead actor and then putting background in, whereas I'd choreographed everything in one go. So he could put the camera anywhere in the amphitheater and it would work. It was all time. So this fight was ending while this one was just getting exciting. That fight was ending while this fight ended exactly the right. So it was all choreographed like a theatrical thing in real time, and everybody had spent so much time getting it to that level that when Ridley came in, he just sat in the stands. He went, "Show me action. Okay, let's come back and shoot this."
Really?
There was no other discussion. It was just, "Okay, that's great, let's shoot."
Now, so it was no green screen then. It was shot all on or was there green screen? You had the actual stage settings?
Oh, for the one where they were chained together, it wasn't green screen at all. For the one where we had the tigers, we added some. They were real tigers, but obviously we couldn't have. There was only one, I think, that was a trained tiger. The others were circus tigers, and so you couldn't let them get too close to Russell in terms of when they came in, we'd have to comp it in, so you'd end up having the tiger swiping without anyone there, and then you'd put Russell in, because it was a circus tiger that would basically, if it catches you, it's going to start eating you.
That's funny. I seen an interview with Russell where he was like, yeah, we're doing the fight scene, and I'm like, yo, mate. He was talking to the dude in the mask. He's like, yo, mate, you're getting a little close to the tiger. And I guess he ignored him or something. And then the tiger ended up getting him or touching him a little bit. And he was like, I told you. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, there were a couple of incidents. I mean, there was one incident I remember, the animal handler, Sled Reynolds. And we normally, because of the way the tigers were, you would have a stake. It's quite a big stake with an eye at the top, and you would run the chain through the eye, and then you'd hammer the stake into the ground. So literally, it's 2 foot of stake under the ground with an eye and a chain that goes out. So you've got the tiger on the end of a chain, like a collar, like a dog. And if the tiger starts looking around and turning to try to, the 3 guys holding it, just pull it, and it's going down on the ground, and it can't get anyone. It's literally at the stake. And Ridley wanted a shot. That was we needed one more pickup shot. I can't remember. It was one day, and literally it was a tiger shot. And so we need this quick shot, quick. And nobody had a big stake, and Sled had a small spike. And he came over and he went, oh, this is fine. This is just for this one shot. It's no problem. And he started hammering the stake, and I looked at the stake. I went, that's not going to hold. If that tiger wants to go, it's not going to hold him. Yeah. And I said, okay, I'll just walk over here, guys. You're the animal handlers. So he hammered it in. Anyway, the tiger, we wanted the tiger to be more agitated. That was the whole point of the shot. It wasn't because they'd come out at the beginning of the sequence while we were shooting, all, angry and everything. And then after a little while, they get bored, even though there's 1,500 people in the crowd shouting, and the tigers just get bored after an hour or 2 hours, and they're not looking like they're animated. Yeah. So we needed a shot of an animated tiger, and literally they tried to rile the tiger up, and the tiger was pulling, and as it pulled, the stake just flipped up out the ground. So now they've got this tiger on the end of a chain like a dog, and the tiger just looks around and he went, wait a second, I'm free. So he turned around. The guys dropped the chain, started running. 3 stunt guys who were holding the tiger started running. The tiger's boom, he's on top of them already. The animal handlers are running in, pulling the tiger off. They're pulling the tiger off the guy. The guy's trying. Luckily, nobody got hurt, but it was a pretty heavy situation.
So you'd say that's a fun day on set?
Well, it was a memorable day. I'm not going to say fun, but memorable for sure.
That's cool, man. I really appreciate you coming on, dude, and just kind of chatting with me.